Hey everybody, I'm so excited to have you here. We have a big group here tonight and I'm thrilled. Everybody says they can see us and they can hear us, so we're out of the dark, I guess, technically. Again, just so much response to this. Before we get started, it will be about 45 minutes long. We'll kind of cut it off at 9:45, and then for 15 minutes we'll be here available for answering questions if there are still some questions. I know that canning can be intimidating. And we're not just talking about canning. We're going to talk about sort of all the different ways that you can preserve food, because canning is one option, and then there's a lot of other sort of options as well. So we'll hit a little bit on all of those. But look at Malia. She looks like the most prepared for the evening. She has these shelves in her kitchen and dining area that make me jealous, because look at how beautiful they look with all her canned goods on them. But yeah, so canning it's kind of the most intimidating way to preserve food. Maybe next to fermenting. I don't know. It's like, if you've never done it before, it can feel like totally foreign, but it's in your blood, because look, people, our grandparents and their parents, they all preserve food. So this is something that once we start doing it, really comes back pretty naturally. So don't be intimidated for long. Go ahead and try. You will have failures, as with every great thing in your life. You're going to do some things that don't work, and you're going to be like, that was a waste of time or effort or money or whatever. But in the end, you're going to feel like it's totally worth your time, investment, and learning, and just kind of embracing that learning curve. So again, feel free to drop a line and say hi and where you're from. We would love to know where everybody's coming in from. We have a very diverse crowd, and I'm excited about that. And the Q&A is open, so you can post questions in there if you want. But wait a little bit maybe and just see if we hit on it before you start flooding us with the Q&A. Because a lot of you shared questions ahead of time, so we already have those and are kind of prepared to answer them. But I'm gonna so I'm Lacey. I've owned the Schoolhouse Life. We are just committed to helping people get educated on self-sufficient issues and things. Malia, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Malia. I live in Greensboro. I've been canning since I can remember. Mm-hmm. Because my grandmother and my father, we did it every year. And my dad's considered himself retired now, and all he does is have us can and give it to him because he doesn't want to.
Oh, he's a retired canner.
Yes, he retired from canning. And we have 5 kids, and we try to garden, have chickens, bees. That's about all I know right now.
Very cool. Okay. All right. Jenny Brown, formerly known as the Canning Mama on her blog. I don't think she's been keeping up with that anymore, but she's so confident that she calls herself the Canning Mama.
I started that so long ago. So I'm Jenny. I do live in the mountains of Southwest Virginia. I have 4 kids, and I started canning with my mom when my mom learned how to can when I was a teenager. So 20 plus years ago. We started canning applesauce and green beans and stuff like that from the garden when we moved to the mountains. And when I became an adult, I just started growing a garden every year and canning like crazy, and preserving from the orchards nearby and picking strawberries at strawberry farms and stuff like that. So yeah, that's I learned through trial and error for the most part.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the key, is sort of just get some jars and like start doing it, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we'll start with canning, because I feel like that's the hot topic. And I think the first question that most people were asking is, what can you even can? So let's start and answer that question. Like, what are the best crops to can? And I'll just start, because I have a few of like my favorite things to can, and then there are some things that I love to harvest and preserve, but I don't really like them canned. So my favorite things, probably top canning things, are corn. I love to can corn. I think it is the greatest thing in the world to pop open corn and just dump it in chili or something in the middle of winter. It tastes like summer. I also love to can peaches and applesauce, and what else? Tomatoes. So those are the top, was that 5 things that we can in our house. What do you guys can the most of?
I would say number 1 is green beans. Applesauce for sure, because I live near a lot of orchards, so I have access to lots of apples, different pickle products, tomato products, and jams.
Pickles, that's a good one. Pickles, because pickles you can do, they kind of cross over the fermentation line, so it's interesting. But yeah, Malia, what about you? We can see some of your stuff. We could kind of guess what's in those jars, but what do you do most of?
So green beans, of course. And then I love to do fire roasted tomatoes, so I really like to broil them before canning them. Brunswick Stew, which is right up
Yes,
there.
you do can Brunswick stew. I love that because that's like a whole nother realm, because I feel like meat can be especially intimidating to can. And there's definitely meat in Brunswick stew. And my dad loves to can venison. He swears it's like the best way to can venison because it comes out super soft. I have never done that personally. I've eaten it and I like it, but I've never done it personally. So keep going. Canning soups is like a big deal.
Grape juices to turn into jellies because I don't always have time to make the jelly when the grapes are ready. Peppers and pepper sauces, salsa and spaghetti sauce.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to think. Yeah, pickles, of course, pickles, but those aren't up there. They're all gone.
I know, laugh. That's funny. All right, so those are the top canning things. So now I think we should go through a few things that we don't like to can, because I think it's important to kind of, like, some people were like, can I can this? And I'm like, oh, no, that'd be gross. So
try it, squash.
No, do it. Yeah, so like zucchini, don't can zucchini, right? No.
I tried.
Did you really? Oh, nasty. I just can't even imagine what that would be like on the other end. Like when you open it, it'd be like mush.
I've canned squash and it turned out pretty well, other than the fact that we let it ripen too long, so the rind was really hard. And then you 3 months later open up a jar and you try to eat it and it's just not edible because the rind was way too hard.
So I actually love to do like pumpkin for sure. I love to can. And we'll can it like as pumpkin butter or just as pumpkin. But yeah, that's one of my favorite things too to have, just because pumpkin goes good with almost everything. But yeah, what else don't we can? Nothing potato-ish. No potatoes.
I've canned potatoes in venison stew.
Oh, well, there you go. Okay, that's one way to do it.
You can
It's in Brunswick stew.
So canning potatoes.
You can can most anything except squash and zucchini doesn't work that great. But I mean, if you put it in a soup, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
You can just about anything.
You can can. We should have titled this webinar "You Can." So the thing to remember is that with everything that you can, there's sort of like a variable way of canning. So we've got, well, correct me if I'm wrong. I think we've got water bath canning, right? Which just requires hot boiling water to cover the jar completely. And then you have pressure canning. And am I missing anything? That's really it, right? Or you can do a water bath canning as the third option, which means it doesn't have to cover the jar. And that is more for like jams and jellies. So, okay, water bath canning. And this is where you guys, I'm relying on you because I rely on charts for this. Every time I can, I'm like, wait, what is it again? But what falls in the category of water bath canning that you don't have to have a pressure canner for?
High acid foods.
Okay.
Fruits, you can water bath can. Jams, you can water bath can. Pickles, anything that has a high level of acidity that is either natural in the food, such as fruits, or that you've added into it. The low acidity foods like vegetables and meats need to be pressure canned.
Okay. So tomatoes, for example.
That's high acidity. Right. So I personally water bath. There is a little bit of controversy about that. Some people say that you can't water bath can, but if I'm doing just straight tomatoes without extra vegetables, I definitely do it. What about you, Malia?
I water bath can all my tomatoes.
Me too.
I ain't got time to pressure can them.
Right.
Yeah. The pressure canning takes longer. You have to get the pressure cooker up to the right temperature or pressure and then let it, steam. I actually purchased the Instant Pot that can, but I've never used it for that because it's not big enough. Because if you're going to can with a pressure canner, I feel like you have to do like 12 jars or at least like it's got to be full before I get that thing fully boiling and up to pressure and everything. With water bath canning, what I love is that you can really do 2 or 3 jars and it's not a big deal at all. So if you have a harvest of, 5 pounds of tomatoes, you can quick and make some sauce with it or just can them as is. And you don't have to pull out the pressure canner. In fact, I was going to have it to show you, but it's in the shed way up there. And I just, you know what it looks like. A Presto pressure canner is like an iconic American thing, I think. Right. And mine came from a thrift store. So don't feel like you have to buy a new one. They're everywhere in thrift stores if you're interested in finding stuff secondhand. So, okay. So water bath, explain the process of water bath canning for us, ladies.
Okay, so with water bath canning, you prepare what you are going to make. Like, for example, let me think of something I water bath can. Applesauce is the number one thing that I water bath can. So I prepare my applesauce. I start with apples, I peel them, I cook them down, I run them through a food mill to puree them. I don't usually add sweeteners. Sometimes I add cinnamon. So once you have your prepared food to go into your jar, then you always want to wash your jars, make sure there are no nicks on the top of the rim, and such like that. But whatever it is you're going to put in it, then you pack your jar within like a 1/2 inch to an inch, depending on what it is that you're canning. You seal it down real tight, and then you put it in a rack that's in your water bath canner. Most water bath canners hold 7 jars, and then you lower it into the water and you let the water come to a boil and cook it for as long as is recommended. For me, to can 7 quarts of applesauce in the mountains, it takes 25 minutes to can it, and then
At
you
that
pull them out.
temperature, boiling water.
Right, while it's simmering the whole time. Yep.
Okay, so just to show you some things really quick, because she talked about putting the lid on. This is a used lid. You wouldn't want to use this lid. You get these brand new and use new ones every time, because this seal won't necessarily work a second time. This red part is what causes the suction and what seals that can up. So first recommendation is always get wide mouth jars. That's my personal choice. Never buy a small mouth jar. Unless you're getting little guys, then it's okay. But
or you get them for free.
Yeah, sometimes I just pass those on anyways. But so this is the ring that Jenny was talking about. The cool thing is once you've got it sealed to store, you can take this ring off and then use it again. So you don't need a ton of these, even though I probably have about 1.5 million. But yeah, so these are the important pieces. This needs to be brand new every time. This does not. It just holds this in place. And then
it's actually safest to take that band off after it has sealed, because if for some reason the lid should come unsealed, which occasionally that happens, then you know that jar is no good anymore. Whereas if you leave the lid on, it can go through like a period of where the food spoils and then it seals back. So if you keep that band off, it's really good.
And let's just address botulism really quick, because I think that's the biggest fear for everyone when it comes to canning. Now, botulism is a scary thing, but for the most part, if you're cooking something out of a can, you're going to cook the botulism out. So if you're canning, like, for example, corn, and you're worried about botulism or whatever, just if you cook it, you really don't have to worry about botulism anymore. It's when you're eating something raw that you need to really consider that. So definitely if you're making something to eat raw, then really consider how you're canning it and make sure you're following the directions very thoroughly, and that you can see, if the can has popped open, the lid has a little dimple in it, and the dimple will go away if it's been open, and you won't hear it pop when you pull the lid off, and all these different things. And of course, I don't want to eat food that's been open either, but botulism sounds so scary. I think it keeps a lot of people from actually canning. And really the risk is only there when you're eating raw stuff. And for the most part, we cook a lot of the things that we take out of cans. It's cooked afterwards too. So any words of wisdom on that, guys?
I would say just whenever you open a can, if it smells funky, don't use it. Just throw it out. If it's a little dark on the top, you can scoop off the top. You don't have to, but that's just from the oxidation of the air. But scoop off the first 1/4 inch of it. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I have probably canned close to 10,000 items or more, possibly, and have never had any problems with that.
Yeah, in fact, my grandma will open her canned applesauce, bring it up from the basement, and it's amazing. It's delicious. She adds about 1 pound of sugar for every quart of apples. Anyway, it's delicious, though. Of course, it's like dessert. And she will scoop off a layer of mold on her applesauce, and we will still eat it because she's like, it's fine. And we're all still here. So, I guess it's fine.
Right.
Malia, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, like Jenny said, I can mine with the rings on, and then I take the rings off and let them all get dry. And then I kind of put the rings on, but very loosely, just to kind of protect me from like bumping the edges of it and possibly dislodging it. So you know, I've had things like we opened up a thing of Brunswick Stew that it didn't smell right. And I was like, okay, it's time we just throw it out. Like your nose is really the best indicator if something is bad. If not, you know, you're probably fine.
Yeah. Another example of a tool you can use, these we've used a few times and I like them because they're very reusable, but you get a seal to go with it. And I should have pulled that out, but I didn't. These are called Tattler Lids. And you can get the red seals and you can replace those and you can use this as a lid instead of getting these which are more disposable. So if you're like really into reusing stuff over and over and over, those are a nice good option. And they're a little, I don't know. Have you guys ever used Tattler Lids?
I do. I have some.
Yeah, they're handy. I like them.
I don't have quite as good success with them sealing. So
I think they're harder.
I use it on something that I'm not going to be heartbroken if it didn't seal. But I do like them too.
Just let's talk about some other tools really quick. Like this is essential when you're canning. Why? Mainly because, I mean, you can use other funnels, but this is like a specific canning funnel. So that means it just fits really nicely in the jar of a mason, or the opening of a mason jar. And it keeps the lip of that jar clean, very clean when you're pouring whatever you're pouring in. And that is important because if there is anything on the lip of the mouth of the jar that prevents that suction or that seal from happening, then that can be a problem. And the worst case scenario is you realize the next day when your jars have cooled that they didn't actually seal, and that can be pretty frustrating. So
that's what you eat first. You stick it in the fridge and eat it.
Exactly. And then this is another essential tool for canning that's called a
jar lifter.
Jar lifter. Oh, great. Ooh, that's fun. Jenny, where's your jar lifter?
I'm not home right now, so it's at home.
Okay. All right. But yeah, so look, you have a hot water bath, right, going on, and you don't want to reach in there to grab your jars out. So this is the perfect size for any jar, grabs it very securely, and you've got your jar out. So that's an essential tool too if you're going to start canning. And that really is it. A big pot if you're going to do water bath, which I would suggest starting with a water bath and trying a few things. You need a giant, what do you have? What is that?
The lid lifter.
I always heat up my taps, and so you need this to get your hot taps out of the boiling water so you don't burn your fingers, which I've gotten them out without it because I've lost it. I don't know how many times. The kids will take it and stick it to the fridge because it's a magnet.
Wait,
picks up the lids out of the hot water.
Wait. You heat the lids.
It's just a lid lifter. Yeah, because you need to heat up that rubber a little bit to get it tacky and make it stick.
Well, see, I've never done that, so this is good to know.
It just ensures it gives you a better chance of a good seal to have that hot lid with the tacky stuff. And yeah, those are a must. And Malia, mine is missing right now too, and I have two of them, and they're both missing.
No, we lost them. That's hilarious. I need it. It's on my list. And yes. Yeah, Tanya, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name, is saying Tattler Lids, that was the name, correct? Very good. So back to fruit stuff that we preserve. That looks like jellies and jams. You can make pie fillings. Successful fruits that we have canned. We've canned cherries. I love canning cherries. We've canned peaches whole. We've canned peaches quartered and halved and as pie filling. What else have we canned? I've never canned blueberries, but I know you can. It's just we eat them too fast. So that's not a potential in our house. What do you do? Very easy to
can. You put them in the jar and you can them.
That's it. Okay.
You don't cook them. You don't add anything. You pack the jar and you water bath can them, and they create their own juice.
That's awesome. And then when they come out, it's just like a pie filling kind of texture, or?
I usually use them for pancake topping, but you can add sugar and spices to it to make pie. Okay. Yes.
Okay. Very cool. So that's the thing that you really want to keep in mind is what are you going to do with this product after it's canned? Because I've also canned a lot of really stupid things. I've canned like just because I have it, I'm like, oh yeah, what have we? I'm trying to think of some things that we can peaches whole because this is actually really, really, really important. If you want to can peaches, make sure that you get Freestone peaches, okay? Or you will drive yourself bonkers, okay? Freestone means the pit inside the peaches just is free and it doesn't stick to the pulp of the peach. The other kind is called, what is it called? Stone? Clinkstone. And clinkstone are delicious to eat, right? But they're really not great for canning and cutting the peach off of that stone. So Freestone peaches are great for canning, but we got clinkstone and I canned them whole because I just couldn't fight with them anymore. And I stuck like cloves and stuff in there. And I bet they're actually amazing, but it's like I see them there and it's not something that is appealing to me to eat at all. So I don't know. Do you guys have some examples of like canned things that you're like, that's not really, yeah?
I have made, which I have actually never eaten, by the way, but I have made corn cob jelly and peach pit jelly.
Oh, that reminds me. We made watermelon rind jelly, and it was terrible. Like, so gross. What a waste.
I just I can't bring myself to eat the corn cob jelly that I made. I'm like, why did I do this?
Yeah. So definitely, like, if you're going to go to all the trouble of canning something, like, taste it first. Like, have somebody else's watermelon rind jelly. See if it's worth it and you like it, and then make it. That was terrible. Okay, so how does everybody feel about canning? Let's hear what your thoughts are on canning. Are you excited to try canning? And ladies, while we're waiting for some people to say something, what are your favorite resources for canning? Like, who do you turn to for your timing and whether you water bath? Yay, Malia's got the Ball Blue book.
That's what I was going to say too. Exactly.
So who else to turn to than the very manufacturer that we all rely on so heavily? So yeah, the Ball Blue book is awesome. And it has all the charts and everything that you would need to decide how long you're going to bathe things for, what the pressure is that you need to get them to. If you're in an elevation, like Jenny's in the mountains, so she needs to do it a little bit differently than we need to do it here in the Piedmont. Do you use fresh fruit when you can? I heard you should do it for potatoes. Fresh fruit with potatoes?
Oh, we use fresh fruit. Yeah, I mean, I use the freshest fruit or vegetables possible and can them. Like I got 8 gallons of strawberries the day before yesterday, and they were made into strawberry jam yesterday morning. So they went from field to strawberry jam in less than 24 hours. The fresher the fruit, the better.
No, she meant fruit fresh, which I'm actually going to say is probably... is it citric acid or something that just keeps it from browning probably, which you can do. I never have, but you can do, and it will keep the color of your fruit and whatever you're preserving, I'm pretty sure. Is that right? Do you use it, Malia?
I do not use it. And so this is how my peaches look. They're kind of brown, but we're okay with it. I try to put as little things in as possible. Some salt.
Yeah.
When you need it, not for peaches, but and we just water pack these too. So.
Okay, explain water pack.
So I will usually kind of parboil my peaches a little bit and in the water, and then I pack them in and then add water up to the correct, I haven't done peaches in years, to the correct line. And that way they're in water. Like, I've never done peaches by themselves, without water in it, but you need to get it up to a certain point so that it'll seal, so the jar will seal essentially.
And when you parboil the peach too, one of the reasons we do anyway is to get the skin comes off real easy if you do that.
Yeah.
So you can get that skin off. And that's true for tomatoes too. Anything else? Okay, so saving zucchini and squash. I love to save zucchini. I shred it and I put it in the freezer because what I use zucchini most for after I've saved it is for zucchini bread. And so I'll even put it in the measurements that I need for zucchini bread. So I think it's 2 cups in a Ziploc or whatever container you're going to put in the freezer. I try to keep it as flat as possible in the freezer because it thaws easier when it comes out. And you can stack them really neatly in the freezer when you do it that way. So you can save it in chunks for sure. And especially with other squashes, zucchini is so wet that it's not as good to use. Like when you take it, I've done this before because I was like, oh, this is so good sauteed. I chunk it and I butter fry it. But when you take it out of the freezer, it's very mushy and doesn't have the same structure that it had when it went into the freezer. So it's not going to cook like it did. It's very mushy. And so, that doesn't matter for when I'm putting it in a bread, but it does matter if I'm putting it as a side next to our dinner. So it's definitely different. And if you threw it in a casserole, it might be okay, but it's still going to have a different texture. So, and it feels more watery. I don't know how it gets more water when it's in the freezer than it has, when it goes in. I don't know, but it's true for me with zucchini. I don't know. You guys, what do you think about zucchini?
Yeah, I just shred it, stick it in the freezer, vacuum seal it, throw it in the freezer.
Yeah. Yeah, see, I don't even vacuum seal it, but that's a great way to do it. What, Jenny?
I find that it does not freeze as well as some things for long-term storage. I would probably try to use it within about 6 months, is what I have found.
It does seem to be the
Oh
first.
yeah, we always use it within 6 months.
Yeah. Yes.
It goes quick.
I hope that answers that question. Squash, I feel like, is a different animal. Squash, it depends on the squash. So for me, pumpkin freezes really, really well. I like pumpkin frozen. I like pumpkin in the can. I know that it's actually one of the ones that people are, it's controversial to can. People think that you need to pressure cook it. I've never pressure cooked it, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't. So it's one of the ones that's like on the line. Okay, let's talk about freezing too, because I have some fun tips for freezing that you guys probably do too. Because freezing can be a really great way. What I love about freezing is it actually withholds a lot more of the nutrition than canning does. When you can something, you're cooking it, it's getting hot, it's breaking down some of those enzymes and the nutrients and things that are in there, right? Just like when you cook it in real life. Now, freezing stuff does not do that. It holds a lot of the nutritional value that it goes in with, which is great, right? Because we want to have that in the middle of the winter or whenever we need it. So fruits and berries of all kinds go in our freezer as much as we can get our hands on when it's in season. And what that looks like for us is usually we'll go to the farmer's market a lot this time of year. Of course, we try to grow a lot too, but we're not to the point yet where we have enough blueberries on our property to sustain my children through the year. It's just, we could have all the blueberries in the world. I think we eat them all. So we try to get locally grown or wild grown blueberries and freeze those when they're ripe and not before. So you don't want to can anything or freeze anything before you would want to actually eat it. I don't know if there's an example of when you would. Can you guys think of an example of when you would want to do that? You really want to wait until it's.
And let me jump in right here because it goes along with freezing and canning and everything. Another good resource that I like is pickyourown.org.
Yes.
You can go on there and enter in your zip code, and it will tell you where there are farmers markets and pick your own fields. Mm-hmm. And it also has really good resources on preserving the food as well.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I love that site because if you're ever like, where can I go pick blueberries? Just type in your zip code and it'll tell you all the local places, which is very cool. Okay. So freezing is really good. One thing I will recommend is freeze your fruit on a tray, spread out, stick it on a cookie sheet, freeze it, stick it in the freezer, let it freeze, then pull it back out again and stick it in your Ziploc bag and stick it back in your freezer or whatever container you're going to use and stick it back in your freezer. Now, what that does is it keeps it from freezing as one solid mass, which can be really difficult to actually use for things like smoothies or whatever you're going to use them for. So that's one trick that we rely on pretty heavily. With strawberries, I definitely recommend, especially if you're going to use them a lot for smoothies, this is what generally how we consume our frozen fruits. Leave the leaves on. Don't take them off. Don't pull them. Just leave them on and you're good to go. And put them in the freezer. Once they're frozen, bring them out, put them in a Ziploc, and then stick them back in. That's my best tip when it comes to freezing. Do you guys have any other good tips when it comes to freezing?
I use jars a lot for freezing. Like I use my canning jars because I freeze a lot of soups when we have like enough soup left over that it's like too much for maybe another whole meal, but not enough to can. So I'll just throw it in a wide mouth jar up to the freeze line if it's got it labeled, and then freeze my jar so it's a more reusable thing as opposed to using like Ziploc bags and stuff like that we don't save. Not all the jars have a freeze line. So this jar has a line and it says for freezing, but it's right here where my finger is. But this is just a wide mouth pint. I don't know if I don't think they have a freeze line on the quarts, and because the quarts have the shoulder, it might not always be a good idea to do that. I've frozen like bananas or, things that are not like going to expand that much, nothing with a liquid in it, but, just oatmeal or bananas or whatever I want to throw in the freezer. I often just use my jars too, instead of I try not to buy many Ziplocs is the point.
Yeah, we do too. And I will say frozen fruit is my like one major exception. I like gallon bags for frozen fruit, but I wish I could find a good alternative. So if you can think of one, tell me. But yeah,
freezing. And if you are freezing, if you're freezing in Ziploc bags, a tip that I found that makes it kind of like you're vacuum sealing it is fill up a dish pan or your sink with water, fill up your Ziploc bag with the food that you're going to put into it, and then with the top of it open, submerge the bag into the sink or the dish pan of water. It forces all of the air out, and then you have just the top of the bag left. You seal it with it completely submerged, and you pull it out of the water, and it is vacuum sealed.
My mind is blown. That's incredible. I had no idea. I love that. Okay, totally doing that. And there also are food saver devices that you can get that suction out all the stuff. So if you want to, you can invest in those. I feel like I'm never that happy with them when I use them. I'm always like a little bit annoyed. It's kind of like using the house printer. Like 60% of the time it works, and 40% of the time I want to throw it out the window. So if you want to, you can. Some people really love food preservers. So yeah, earthquake in California. Oh no, I thought that's where she was from. I'm like, where's earthquake, California? Anyway, sorry. Bye, Lisa. I hope everything's okay. I can't fit enough food in food bags that you heat seal. Yeah. Definitely. I struggle with that too. Like I'll find myself like, I think I overfilled this one again. How did I do that? So I don't know.
That's why you buy the roll of bags and cut them and seal them to size.
I still do it. Yeah. Anyway, some people love them. What are some other ways I feel like that's a lot of really great freezer tips. So let's move on to just a few other great ways to store food. And some of the reasons that I love these is that they aren't reliant on electricity, and they're not reliant on, which actually electricity is the big one, because if your freezer goes out and all your canned goods are in there, you're going to be in trouble, right? It's literally the reason I have a generator. Yes, Patty guessed it. Dehydrated Foods. Okay, I think dehydrating is amazing, and I am trying to learn more and more of it. We've done a lot with herbs. We've dehydrated a lot of herbs, which is just drying herbs, right? And there's lots of easy ways you can do that. You can make a bundle and hang it upside down and let that dry and then put it in your jars. Super easy, straight from the garden. It is so cool to start cooking with just the herbs that you grew in your garden. It's a really neat feeling to not have to buy little jars of oregano every time you go to the grocery store, right? So definitely drying herbs is a really great thing. Some of my favorites to have on hand, we grow a lot of thyme, dill, oregano I mentioned, parsley is another really good one, mint. What other herbs do you guys grow? Then things like lemon balm. There's more medicinal herbs that you can grow and dry. Do you guys dry herbs?
Dry herbs some. My favorite thing to dry are apples and strawberries.
So how do you do that?
I have an apple peeler, core, slicer. If you're going to get into food processing, buy one.
Amen. I see these at thrift stores all the time. All the time. I think I had 3 at one point because I would just buy them every time I saw them.
Yeah, absolutely. So you stick the apple on it and you turn it in 10 seconds later, you have a completely peeled, cored, and sliced apple. Mm-hmm. I cut it in half. Sometimes I will dip it in like a lemon juice and On Guard essential oil mixture and then freeze it. Sometimes I'll sprinkle it with a little bit of cinnamon. Most of the time I just do it plain. They are going to brown, but I don't care. And then I just will dehydrate apples for days. Because they're such amazing snacks. And the thing about it is, it's a good thing and a bad thing is, you can take like a bushel of apples and fit it into 1 gallon bag. So it's sad at one point. It's like, where did it all go?
It's all gone.
You can store so much fruit in such a small amount of space, or whatever it is you're.
And you can rehydrate them later. I've never done that, but you can rehydrate and use it like as if it was a fresh apple. And people can do that with pies and that kind of. I mean, we eat most of our dried fruit. Like if we dry fruit, we'll just eat it, right? But yeah, we actually have an oven that I bought specifically. I almost would have cursed it if I hadn't been able to fix it a couple of weeks ago. We fixed it though, and now it still works. So, but it has a dehydrator feature, which I think only Jen Air does this. I paid extra for this oven because it has a dehydrator feature. But everyone swears by the Excalibur is the dehydrator that everyone loves the most. It's like round and has like 6 or 7 layers. But there's lots of different dehydrators out there. When you're talking about dehydrating, you know, if you live in a really dry climate, we live in a very humid climate. So I cannot take, like we have a hanger that we can use at some times of year that just hangs and lets things dry in it, and it's like net so it doesn't let bugs get in. But in our climate, we cannot use that throughout the whole year because stuff just molds and gets gross. So for most dehydrating purposes, we use an actual dehydrator. An oven.
Somebody just asked about using air for dehydrating. When I was a teenager and thought I was Laura Ingalls, I dehydrated apples between 2 window screens. I laid them out on the window screen on a set of sawbucks, and then I put another screen on top of it, and I clamped it together so they couldn't get all twisty and stuff. And it did work. It worked well. I would bring it in at night so it didn't get dew on it, and then I would set it back out in the day until they were pliable. But they're more like apple leather. But another thing that I've heard people doing is using their vehicles, like using screens or pans or something, and putting it
I've heard that
in the
too.
vehicle.
Yes.
The vehicle gets really hot, and it helps to dehydrate it faster. I've never tried that, but I have done open air, I've done oven, and I've used a dehydrator.
Mm-hmm. And my kid, one of my kids made a solar oven that I'm eager to try, because she put it out when she made it, which was a few months ago, and it got real hot real fast and was so easy to make. So solar oven might be a really good, you can make it out of a pizza box and have like the perfect dehydrating machine for the sun. But low on the oven will often work too if you keep your eye on it. But Jenny mentioned fruit leathers, and that actually is one of my favorite things to do. Is I'll take like applesauce, before we've canned it, and just spread it out on a cookie sheet on this like a silicone or on freezer paper or on parchment paper, and then stick it in the oven and dehydrate that, and that makes like this really nice fruit leather that my kids love to eat. So this is especially good to do with fruit that's overripe. If you get some like strawberries that get just a little past like you don't want to eat them straight, then you can make a nice fruit leather by just cooking them down a little bit and spreading them out like that on a pan, and bada bing bada boom. I made these last week. These are mulberries. What I love about dehydrating is all you have to do is pick it, throw it on a tray, and stick it in the oven. So we picked a ton of mulberries last week, threw them on a tray, stuck them in the oven, and literally forgot about them until the next day. And we're like, oh, look, they're ready. So that little dried fruit is a mulberry, and easy peasy. And now they can be used in, if I made like bread with it or muffins or just straight out of the jar. It's a really easy thing to do with berries, little berries like that for sure. Oh, meat. Dehydrating meat to make jerky is a really smart way to preserve meat. In fact, it's probably the most what people have done for the longest amount of time to preserve their meat, next to salting it, which is sort of the same idea really. You're just sucking the moisture out with salt. So dehydrating meat and making jerky is one of our favorite things to do too. If you've never done that, you should totally do it, because it's really satisfying to marinate your meat in some seasoning and then dehydrate it, and it just makes the most amazing jerky. Do you guys have any tips or tricks about making jerky?
I've made it some, but I'm not a pro at it, so not really. Just try to use natural ingredients. Don't use MSGs and stuff like that. Try to make your own rub instead of just buying the prepackaged stuff, because it's likely to have some yucky ingredients in it.
Yeah, Patty says hubby is a trucker, can't keep enough jerky. Yeah. I always laugh at the size that you can buy jerky in bags at the store. I'm like, this is for like half a snack. It's not enough jerky. And it's so expensive too. So making your own can be really good, especially if you're a hunter or if you have a farm. So we've done it with sheep and goats, because we have our homestead and that's what we have on it. So it can be really satisfying. Okay. Dehydrating, what else to preserve? Storing, I think we should talk about that just a little bit. Storing vegetables can be tricky, like onions, potatoes, and squashes and sweet potatoes. And I honestly feel like I still have a little bit to learn here. Obviously, a root cellar is maybe the best idea for storing these things without canning them. But what do you guys think about storing? Do you have a good method of storing your potatoes and everything when you have a lot of them?
I need a root cellar.
Yeah, I mean, it's really about the root cellar, because growing up in the mountains, we always like had houses built into the hills, and so you usually had a good root cellar. So my grandmother was huge root cellar with like 3 freezers in it, shelves like this that line the whole thing with can jars, and then in the floor there would be like bushels and bushels of apples and potatoes, and they stayed good all winter long.
Yeah,
they would take you right up into summer, and they would be just fine. And I feel like the key was the root cellar. I have never been able to replicate that once I got up the mountain.
Yeah, my grandma is the same. She's up in northwestern Pennsylvania, and she just goes down and gets what she needs and comes back up into her. It's not even really a root cellar; it's just her cellar. I'm thinking we could replicate that in our crawl space. But yeah, I think root cellaring is such a smart idea. It's such a good way to be able to get stuff when it's in season, or grow your own potatoes and have a place to stick them. Because I mean, when they go bad, it's true. When one bad apple just will ruin a whole bunch. So you really do want to make sure that you have a good place to store them. I know that I talked to an old timer about sweet potatoes. And there was like this magic way of like laying them in hay just the right way, and like hay between all the sweet potatoes to make sure that they would last through the year. And I can't tell you much more than that about it, but it sounds like something I need a in-person workshop on. Okay, good question. How long do canned goods usually last?
Don't ask me. A really long time.
I never bring myself to throw away canned goods, so yeah.
I made an apple crisp for a group of ladies that were not very homesteading, sustainable type of mindset. And they were like, oh my gosh, this is so good. Can we have the recipe? It's just so delicious. And I said, well, I can't really give you the recipe because I made this apple pie filling 9 years ago and I canned it. And I don't know what I did, but it's really good, isn't it? So that was 10 years old.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I love that.
USDA does not recommend that, but anyway, yeah, I will eat 10-year-old food without.
There are charts, there are things. I mean, if you pay attention to whether it's still sealed or not, for the most part, you are going to be fine. Malia, what are you showing us?
So this came from my grandmother's house, and it was canned in 1981. And we have eaten them before. This is my last one. I know. This is my last jar from like early 80s, and so I've just saved it because I just miss my grandmother. And and then this jar, you can read the label. It says 04, and they're still fine. They're still sealed. Nothing looks gross inside. Nothing's molding. Nothing has turned brown. And this jar is from 1981.
So if you're looking for longevity, canning is the way to go. Freezer stuff will not last for 20 years, 30 years, or almost 40 years. So that is definitely the right thing to do if you want to keep stuff forever. Question, okay, how to store things on the NC coast? Yeah, Sarah, definitely. It could be really tricky in our humid environment. If you have a pantry that's a dark space, a brown paper bag can be a really great way. Actually, is that a lie? Something dark. You just want to keep them so they feel like they're in the ground is really kind of my best description of how to keep this stuff as fresh as you possibly can for a long time. So out of direct sunlight, out of humidity, in a controlled temperature environment is really, those are the top 3 things that you need to consider. And that is why a root cellar works, because root cellars stay at that below ground temperature almost constantly. It's like 55 degrees or something all year round. And that's why a root cellar works.
Perfect for cheese. Root cellars, they're good for cheese. If only
I
had
a whole nother class. Preserving dairy is a whole nother class. Fermenting, we do plan to do like a fermenting class in the future, a webinar in the future, so stay in touch with us. If you haven't joined our Facebook community, I'm going to tell you to just go ahead and do that. We have a lot of fun in there, and we do have upcoming things. There are other ways to preserve. You can make meats, you can make ferments, you can make beer, you can make juices, and lots of other things. So we want to continue this conversation with you guys. My friend just boiled her mason jar after cooking down bushels of tomatoes, no skins. Added salt, poured them into each boiled jar, and the lid sealed one, and then they were done. Is that fine? Yeah. I mean, if the jar is sealed, the jar is sealed. So, yes, Jenny, what?
But I do that with jam only because it's a high acid content and a high sugar content. It may work with tomatoes and stuff like that, but it's not just a matter of sealing it. It's a matter of making sure that any of the enzymes that are going to cause botulism is killed. Which is why you pressure can low acid foods. You have to get it to that high heat and for that length of time to make sure that there's nothing in there that's going to grow after the fact. So you could put hot chicken in a jar and it's going to seal because the jar seals as it cools. So just because the jar sealed doesn't necessarily mean it's safe. I know that the old timers do that with tomatoes. I probably wouldn't, but most people don't do jam that way either. So I think that's just what your comfort level is. But there is definitely something to going through the heat and pressure process to make sure that the food is going to preserve.
Yeah, good point. Somebody asked about storing canned goods, and I think that's a really good question. So in my kitchen, I used to keep my canned goods on because we didn't have a lot of storage. So I had a space above my cabinets, and I would keep them up there. And they looked pretty, and they were, on display. And my grandma came over, and she was like, well, I would never do that. And I was like, okay. Because it's where the hot part of the air rises up there. It gets hotter up there. The temperature kind of fluctuates more up there. And so, her argument was that you should keep it in a more temperature controlled environment. So that's really what you want to do. You don't want your cans to be experiencing extreme changes in temperature. So you wouldn't want to keep them in a shed. You want to keep them in your pantry. You want to keep them on shelves inside, out of the elements for sure. And definitely out of sunlight, because it will get through the jar, the glass, and break down your canned goods and heat them up and all kinds of things. Do we need to hot bath everything for 25 minutes, or are there different foods, different amounts of time? Yes. So you're just going to want to look for one of those charts that tells you how long you need to do each thing. And a lot of times, if you're using a recipe, it'll tell you. So if you're making jelly, then it'll tell you. Oh, Jenny already answered you. Sorry, Jenny.
And one tip about, because we didn't really talk about pressure canners, but you can, if you pick up a pressure canner at a thrift store, it's a really good idea to take it to like your local ag center and get them to check the pressure on it, because the dial may not always read correct. And then you can, you don't need to change it, but you can know in your head, I know mine's off by about 3 points or 3, PSI or whatever. So I just adjusted it in my head when I'm cooking, because it was given to me from my grandmother, and it's really old and it's been through things. So it's a really great resource. They'll check it for free. I know I've done it in Alamance County.
At the extension's office? Is that what you're saying? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep. Yeah, every county has one of those. Okay. One other thing I was going to give you a tip on tomatoes, because tomatoes, some come in for a while. We'll have a month or two of tomatoes, right? So for us, if we don't get all our tomatoes in one time, what I'll do is I'll actually just kind of keep a crock pot or the Instant Pot sort of running on low almost all the time. And then every couple of days I'll can what's in there. That trick really works for me. I don't know. Not everyone is as comfortable with that as I am, but I've actually made some really delicious tomato sauce that way, because it will get kind of charred in some areas and fruitier in other areas, just depending on how long it's cooked and all of that. So that's one of my favorite tips for tomato season. Jenny, what were you going to say?
Oh, just going back to pressure canners. Most general stores, and of course you can find them online, have new seals and parts.
Right.
So that you can replace those as needed. You don't have to replace the whole canner when it doesn't seal anymore. And keep your seals on hand, because it really stinks when you're trying to bring your green beans up to pressure and they won't come up to pressure because your seal's gone bad.
Yes. And you have your jar with your stuff in there.
Each new season canning, I take the seal off and I try to make sure I oil it really well so that it'll stick better. And Ace Hardware sells them too. I've gotten many seals from Ace Hardware.
Yeah, Ace is a really good place to get your canning supplies. I love going there. They have the best variety of anywhere. So I don't know if that's just our local Ace or if that's true across the board, but I do really like Ace for canning supplies.
You can look up Red Hill General Store online. Mm-hmm. Red Hill General Store in Hillsville, Virginia. You can buy everything from their store online, but they are the owners of All American Canner, which is the gold standard for canners. And you can also get basically any part you would ever need for Presto, Miro, and All American Canners from there.
Very cool.
Put them on sale. I have my eye on one.
If they ever put them on sale, okay, I'll let you know.
This is one book I wanted to show you. It's called Drink the Harvest, which is, I really liked it. The recipes in here are really fun. And it's just a different way to kind of, especially right now, it's kind of berry season right now, a different way to kind of eat what you make and bottle it or drink it or whatever. It's just a new and different way. And it does tell you how to can some things too, so you can make some drinks and can them and have them later, which I think is fun because there aren't a lot of drink canning recipes out there. And I really like this one. So just another idea of things that you can do. I mean, it's really kind of the sky's the limit. And I think that what's happening right now is we're all kind of like, what is it that our grandparents did again? It must have worked for them. So let's try that again. And so we're kind of tapping into those olden day ways, and it's really fun. So I'm excited you guys all joined us on this call. We have a few more minutes. We can take a few more questions, but that was a lot of information. And I feel like between the three of us, we could probably talk the rest of the night. So I'm going to cut it off there. And if you have questions, we'll linger for a little bit and you can go ahead and ask. VL, I'm glad you were here. I don't know what VL stands for, but I'm glad you came.
Hey, one other resource I'll say as we're closing off, if you're making jam and you use pectin, I love Pomona natural
Yes.
bulk pectin.
Yes, amen. Come on the pack
Pound.
the best.
Yes, you buy it by the pound. It's not very cheap, but you use a fraction of the amount that you use with the other regular standard pectin.
And Jenny, can you put a link for that general store? Somebody's asking for that.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that. Look up Red Hill General Store, Hillsville, Virginia.
Red Hill. Okay. Red
Hill General Store in Hillsville, Virginia.
And it's Pomona pectin, or Pomonas maybe. I can't remember if it's Pomonas or not, but it's also
without an R, Pomona, I think.
Yeah, I think I wrote it in there right. And it's a low sugar one too, right? Pectin.
Yes.
Yeah, because some pectins will require more sugar. And I will warn you with jelly, this is something my mom did teach me. You cannot, jelly, when you make jam and jelly, it looks like a lot of sugar. You use a lot of sugar, and you can't just cut it in half because you're like, oh, I don't need it to be so sweet. It has to use the right amount of sugar or it will not work. So, if you've ever read Little Women, when your jelly doesn't work, it can be really like almost a detriment to your marriage.
Then you just have pancake topping.
That's right. You have to figure out something else to do with your jelly that isn't gelling. So that can be really frustrating. Thank you, Natasha. She posted that link for Red Hill General Store, which is redhillgeneralstore.com. Perfect. Okay, join our group. It is on Facebook. It is the Schoolhouse Life with Lacey and Drew. My husband is Drew, and he does a lot of the webinars with us. Yeah, please join that group. You should have gotten an email about it if you registered for this, so there should be a link in that email. If not, just search for it on Facebook, and I can type the link to facebook.com. Jenny and Malia, are there any good ways for people to connect with you?
Find me. I'm Jenny Logan Brown on Facebook. yourwellnessadvocate@gmail.com.
What is your Instagram? Isn't it Joyful Jenny?
Joyfully Jenny, yes.
Dots? Anything like that?
No, just Joyfully Jenny.
Malia, what about you?
I think mine's just Malia Prince or Malia Patterson Prince. To look at it, I have no idea.
These ladies are super active on Instagram.
I don't know. How do you even look?
You can send them a message anyway.
Malia Prince. It's Malia Prince. And I'm in the group. So, I answer questions in the group when I know the answer.
Yes, that's right. So join the group because then you'll have all the experts. There you go. Okay. Well, you guys are still on here. No one is jumping off the call. So people are like, I want to keep going. We should probably just do this once a week. Good. Gosh, I'm glad it was helpful. That's good. I'm excited. Okay. And if you guys have any feedback for us, let us know. Sarah says once a week. It's the Jenny, Lacey, Malia show.
We got lots more to do. We can talk about it forever.
We could. Maybe we could.
Oh, yeah. We just barely scratched the surface.
Next time we can.
You didn't even break down pressure canning.
No, we did. We did
That's
not.
right.
That would have taken the whole hour.
That's the most intimidating part.
Universal pectin, that's it.
Yeah, pressure canning is the most intimidating thing for sure, I think. Because you feel like if you're not used to pressure cooking, it feels like the thing is going to explode. And then your kitchen will be demolished. But I've never, ever heard of anyone exploding their kitchen.
Well, in newer canners these days, I mean, if you're using your grandma's canner, there might be a chance of that. But the newer canners these days have like 3 and 4 safety steps. So, I mean, it's impossible at this point because they've got all these little valves that come out to release the pressure and stuff like that. So no more explosions.
Yeah. And people have pressure for a long time.
Here's Malia. You still using grandma's canner.
That's why I want a new canner, and I've got my eye on the 14 quart where you double stack the 7 quarts.
Oh,
yeah. When tomato season and green bean season comes in, because I go to the local farm and buy like 10 bushels at a time to can and fill this whole 4-panel wall to get us through the season. It would go a lot faster if I could put 14 quarts in that canner.
Yes, we do that with sweet corn. Yeah, and it'll take like 4 days because you can only put so much in at a time. We'll get one of those bags of sweet corn. Oh my goodness, it's so good.
I always am running 2 canners.
Yeah, Sarah, I think that's a good idea. We should, how to not. All I know is so far I have not done it. So I'm not sure if.
Just keep your eye on the pressure.
Yeah, just keep your eye on the pressure.
Don't walk away from it. You have to babysit a pressure canner. Like I pull up a chair And I remember sitting with my grandmother and we just watched the needle and we just kept an eye on it.
Pressure cooking, it's only like 7 minutes, right? It's not, I mean, what's the longest pressure cooking?
No, Lacey. No.
120 minutes for Brunswick Stew.
90. Yeah.
Oh, for stew. Yeah.
Yeah.
It takes forever. That's why I need a bigger canner when I make 20 gallons of stew. I need a bigger canner.
Yeah, you do. Oh my gosh. Yeah, you need that. Just tell Sean, he'll get you that.
It's been on my Amazon wish list for who knows how long. Why don't you get Drew to talk to him about buying things on Amazon wish lists and maybe I'll get it.
I'll tell him. I'll put a bug in his ear. Yeah, so use your pressure canner, Tanya. You have to use it or it won't work. Start with water baths though. Like get comfortable with water bath canning and then move into pressure canning. I feel like that's a really good step. If you haven't done water bathing, try it, do that. It's very like, I don't know. I feel like dipping your toes in, dipping your cans in, and then you can fully submerge.
Malia, is that lard in your little 1/2 pint jars next to your tomatoes?
It is. I just rendered it a couple of weeks ago.
Nice.
Beautiful.
That I did not can. I just let the heat seal the jar up because it's okay.
Do you have to seal lard? I didn't think you had to.
Well, I mean, it will go rancid.
Will it?
Yeah, it will. But we use it fast enough. It's great for seasoning, cans, making cornbread, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I stick mine in the freezer.
It's the butter.
I'll let it seal and then stick it in the freezer.
Oh, put it in your freezer. Yeah, that works. Malia's got honey back there. I will mention the botulism honey thing is only true of store-bought honey. You wouldn't get botulism on like a local honey beekeeper's honey because they do pasteurize honey to can it. And when they do that, if the seal breaks or doesn't seal, then you can get botulism, but it doesn't grow on perfectly balanced antibacterial, antifungal honey. So
can you understand what Tanya said? Okay, I dip my cans in to get started.
She's talking about the joke that I made about dipping your cans in instead of dipping your toes in.
Oh, okay. Oh, is that I ain't skirt?
I'm scared.
Hilarious. It looks like that.
I
I ain't scared.
Dude, that's funny. You don't be scared, or be scared and do it anyway. That's my motto. Be scared, but don't let it stop you from actually doing it.
Yeah, when you get too confident, that's when your kitchen's going to explode.
A healthy fear is good, right? We want to have respect for our canners. Anyway, if your canner starts rocking, get out of the house. All right, slap happy. It's 10:07. I am so excited about our call. It was really fun, and I think people are left with lots and lots of good ideas. So I hope you all start preserving, and you're feeling more self-sufficient, and you just feel equipped to do the thing. So do the thing. We'll see y'all soon.
Thank you, guys.
Bye. Thank you.